do anything magical? Excellent. Right, we're back again for our environment strategy. In terms of this workshop, it's updates and directions. Graham Pollard, welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you've all had a good lunch and so on, and are still
Graham, you're muted.
raring to go. No, perhaps I'm again.
Interestingly, it doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you.
All right. Well, is that better?
I can hear you.
Everyone else can hear you, I think,
right.
Graham.
Okay. Well,
So
I'll
perhaps
it's yeah. Yes, environment strategy. So
Is
following
it just
on
me,
from,
or can nobody hear Graham?
Just you.
Just you.
Yeah,
Yes,
I can certainly hear.
Ah, all right, no,
Okay.
you're good now.
I can hear.
Right. Okay. I'll go with the majority. How about that? It's democracy. So yes, carrying on from last month's workshop, I'll try and be as brief as I can, conscious of time of day as well, and everything else that you've had to get through. So I have a presentation to share. I will jump straight into that. I might jump around from document to document a couple of times, hopefully not too much. Hopefully you can as good as see that. We struggle with PowerPoint, but can you see the main part of the slide? You'll have had this in your
Yes, we can.
Your pre-circulated pack anyway, so you'll be aware of what's coming up. Okay, so if I move forward, so basically the purpose was put out in the supporting documents. So we're wanting to work through, get more traction on the vision, settle on the principles, look again at that structure that's been recrafted, or the visual side of it's recrafted. Want to see where we're going on high level goals. So I want to talk through those and then update you on timelines. So
good point. Good
so
point.
the question that I want to ask on the vision, and I'll just jump to the vision shortly, is what form of vision statement do you want? Now I'm going to have to swap documents here. So there we go. Right, so we sent you various versions of a single sentence vision statement, like we have at the top of the screen in the box. Several of those that we've drafted for you, but also an example of how we might follow the future-proof strategy, the draft future-proof strategy, and their vision statement is a number of bullet points. So working on that basis, we might come up with something like we've got on the screen. So my first question really to you is, which style of vision do you prefer us to have for this environment strategy? Any takers?
Yeah. Oh,
Jim, and then Roger and Claire.
yeah, Graham, I suppose from my perspective, a very succinct vision statement, and then some really, I suppose, pithy objectives that we're going to deliver on, and have some costings alongside them as well. So otherwise we end up with a whole list of things which is everybody agrees with, but we can't afford to do any of it. We really need to get some focus on what we are actually going to try and achieve, so that the community know if they support our vision and strategy, that it's not actually going to mean that they're rated off their properties, because effectively we're going to have to pay for this ourselves.
Okay.
Roger, then Claire.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Yeah, I'm of similar mind to Mayor Jim. I think keeping it a simple statement to start with, but then concentrating on the objectives and actually the the nuts and bolts of the strategy as to how we're going to achieve it and what the costs are going to be. So the simpler statement I would go for.
Okay, thank you.
Claire, then Mike.
Yeah, so I liked the simpler statement too, but it was supported by those more detailed things, which, yeah, I actually quite liked that. I liked the later versions of the succinct statement. I think they were the yellow and the purple or something.
Okay.
Just addressing what Jim's and Roger's kind of mentioned on the cost of it. Even though we have the strategy that council has pulled together in collaboration with stakeholders locally, it doesn't mean that we're committing to doing everything in it ourselves. Like, you know, my experience of environmental work is that a lot of it's done by volunteer labour and by leveraging, you know, other agencies and things like that. So while I agree, you know, if council had to pay for the whole lot on its own, it would be unaffordable. I don't know if there's an opportunity to say in it that we'll implement it by looking at, you know, ways to leverage other inputs and yeah, partnerships and things like that, so that the impact on rates is minimised, and that we take a strategic approach or something, so that we're at least we're covering the highest priorities or something.
Okay, I've noted that.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you to the chair. You're just picking up really, or just off the back of Claire's comments really, and it's just, I don't know whether I agree with this in its current state, because it really puts a lot of onus on us where, I mean, I don't mind if we lead the vision, but we shouldn't have to necessarily, why do we necessarily have to be the ones that implement it or be the implementers of it and incur potential costs? I mean, we can lead a vision, but as Claire's alluded to, other stakeholders, but more importantly, the community are the ones that actually have to largely implement it. We can drive and lead it from behind, lead it from alongside, lead it from out in front at times. But I really think for this to be successful, there needs to be more in here about actually, it's really has to, the community, it's the communities. We just lead it and we bring in the stakeholders, but we can't be accountable to this thing in terms of costs.
And this is not intended to be something that council pays for everything, but as has been said, it's going to be about leadership and working with the community, maybe businesses, stakeholders, partners, and so on, which is why we've preferred to be saying, and why the feedback that we have, people preferred us to talk about our vision rather than council's vision, because it's about the wider community. So I'm taking it that the preference is for the single sentence statement and not the bullet pointed one.
Yeah.
On that basis,
that's my preference.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any way, just I agree with what Mike has said, and certainly some of the comments that Claire raised. You almost feel like it's a proactive obligation placed on us to read it in that way, and I wonder if there's any benefit in adding the word to facilitate. Our vision is to facilitate the restoration and protection of Māori of the environment, blah, 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 so on and so forth, rather than actually actively saying that is our vision, because although there might be a larger vision in that space, I think Claire's quite rightly pointed out that a lot of these actions don't take place at a council level. An overwhelming majority of what is done in this space in our district is done by volunteer and community groups. So if we can facilitate and help and lend weight or advice or whatever, then that's our role. It's not our role to set up, squads of conservation groups. That's not what I see our role as being. Does that make sense? And Claire, do you think that sounds about right?
Okay, so I've just added something to the top line there in that box.
Mm.
Is that the kind of thing that you were thinking of?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think, Claire?
Yes, yeah, I'm happy with that. I mean, I do have a preference to support that with further detail as, listed further down. But
Yeah.
I do agree that we need a succinct statement to begin with. Yeah, and I do like the fact that it covers all the well-beings and mentions present and future generations. Yeah.
Okay.
Past. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So I'm just going to move the screen up because you mentioned Councillor.
Graham, just before you do,
yeah.
How can we upgrade the environmental well-being of the past and the economic well-being of the past? It doesn't make any sense. Like you say, the past, the present, and future generations, but we can't really affect past generations, can we?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just bear in mind, because what actually I didn't put on the screen, and maybe I should have done, that this version incorporates the views of Naomi Taupo, for whom, and they were quite emphatic that they wanted past generations to be represented. Now, of course, this is Council's vision. It's going to be difficult to incorporate everybody, so at some point we're going to need to make some decisions around editing this. But I think the gold was the one that they were basing that on. And I think Councillor St Pierre, you mentioned that you liked the purple and the gold, which were those two that are now on the screen. And again, we can amend that to include to facilitate restoration and protection. Otherwise, I think gold is pretty much the same as that dark red that we've just looked at.
I'm inclined to agree with Marcus's point about including past generations. It's not discrediting the importance of understanding the past, but it's in terms of what we're now in 2022 and going forward are capable of doing. You just want to, can you just scroll it back up again so we can have a look at it, please? So see the red writing.
We'll try and bring that up as far as I can.
Can I just
not so easy.
The consideration of past generations, could that not be in the consideration of cultural well-being of the present community as regards iwi Māori? Because that's an important cultural consideration to them, so it's therefore included if we say the well-being of present and future generations.
Okay. Certainly a point we can discuss there.
And Graham, I've just got another little point. I've made a note about we should include equitable use of resources. I think there's been a criticism in the past that some resources have been exploited, and benefited one part of the community and at the expense of others. So,
okay, maybe that comes into the principles that we want to follow. The problem with this kind of statement is that it can blow out into something so big that it becomes difficult to read and follow. Yeah. Which is where the bullet point list of future-proof might be handy. So you don't want to overblow this if you're wanting to stay with this simple statement. But I think we've got that in the principles as well. Okay. So it certainly needs to be included. So I'm just not clear now where we're heading. Are we looking at dark red? Or are we looking at gold? Or a combination of the two?
I like the red, but I'm wanting to address the issue of including the terminology past. And in terms of trying to streamline it a bit, we've said sustainable living of the social. Why don't we just use the word sustainability? So it should read, our vision is to facilitate the restoration and protection of the Māori of the environment, promote resilient and sustainable ability, promote resilience and sustainability of social, cultural, economic, and environmental well-being,
Resilience.
present and future generations.
Sustain.
Susan, can I just have a comment? Hey, I actually think we're not in a position to actually come up with a definitive answer to this. And look, I think it really it all hinges around that word Māori. And I understand, and I don't think the understanding's in this room. You can look at definitions, because I think while they've got past in there, it relates directly to that word Māori. And that word Māori is about all living things that have been passed down through ancestors and whakapapa, etc., etc. It's actually got quite a big meaning. That's why in our cultural lens here, we can't see why past is in there. I can sort of start to see how through their cultural lens, past is in there, because past is as relevant as future or present. I think we just need to be a bit careful what we change here, just without the full understanding of how that word Māori ties into the rest of that sentence.
For you, Susan, I just wonder, we're talking about the well-being of present and future generations, but having regard to the past or past generations. And I wonder whether that's the thing, is that what we're wanting to do is to provide for the present and future, but as Mike said, for Māori, recognising the importance of past, present and future. So we can't provide for the well-being of the past, but we can have regard to the past.
Yeah.
And so whether we look at incorporating that wording, and we may not nail it here today, Graham, and elected members, it may be something that we need to further tweak and come back on.
Yeah, and that's my feeling, is that we've reached that point where I've got something to take away and work on again based on this dark red version. And we'll come back to you. Probably we might be able to do it through the mail out possibly, and seek your feedback that way, rather than take up more time at the next workshop when we'll be wanting to look at other things, I've no doubt. And you'll have other chances to look at this, because obviously we've got to keep coming back workshopping and with the document drafts as well. So I'm comfortable with where we're going on this. If you're all happy to move on, I will jump out of this screen and back to the presentation.
I'm just going to have to leave now, so my apologies, and thanks, Graham. I'm happy with what you've got, but I'll look for feedback. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Claire.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, this is going, okay.
You're on mute, Lou.
You're on mute, Lou.
Sorry, Graham, don't forget that we have a past too, and we've got memorials and things around this town for all of us, and people, we recognise people at Anzac Day, and we'll run memorials and all this. So we've got a Maui as well, and and a history, and it's very important that we retain that. So it's not just Maui that has that history, we all have it. And it's something that has to be recognised across all of the people, not just some of the people.
Yeah. Thank you for that a reminder, Councillor. That's timely. Okay, so principles. We started to look at this last month and we ran short of time. They've been pre-circulated. I must say there is no hidden conspiracy in the colours at all. So they're just what occurred to me at the time. So the ones that are green on the list, we have already seen. There was feedback very much against the do no harm or as little harm as possible. We didn't get any direction as to whether that should stay or go. So actually it might be as well to just see whether we are keeping that one or not. That's the do no harm or as little harm as possible.
my preference would be to take it out.
And I agree with Jim. I think it's misleading. It will, you're saying do no harm or as little harm as possible. You're mentioning the word harm. We don't want to do any harm. So let's take it out.
Okay.
Unlike minor or less than minor effects.
Well,
removing it altogether, removes any issues in terms of arguments around harm and little harm and merits and justified harm or levels of harm. I think removal is probably the most appropriate thing to do.
And the feedback we were getting is that it creates a loophole for people to say, well, I did as little harm as I could, even though I've dug up the hillside, or something like that.
But it is very subjective.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the green that we might want to change, or are we happy with those? If we're okay with those, I'll take those off and move on to the two blue ones, which are new. So the precautionary principle is basically, if you think there might be harm, rather than prove that there's going to be harm, just don't do it. So you avoid the harm rather than mitigate or restore. And as somebody said to me, that's going to be interesting trying to apply that under the RMA. Well, you apply it where you can apply it, obviously. You can't override statute here. But that might be in the way that council goes about its own projects, for example. And the same with the nature-based solution. So we might be using stormwater swales rather than pipes where we can, and that improves the environment in all kinds of ways.
Graham, I'm just mindful of not painting ourselves into a corner in terms of establishing principles under a strategy, which might mean that when it comes to doing something that we have to do as part of our role as a territorial authority, some of these environmental harm or degradation is literally unavoidable. Roading, for example, classic example.
Yeah.
So I would hate us to paint ourselves into such a restricted framework that, whilst sounds nice and makes us feel like we're doing the right thing, it has the effect of making our core activities and the activities our residents expect us to do absolutely impossible to do or undertake, or in the alternative, undermines the very purpose behind or intention behind the strategy.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying, this needs to be tempered with reality,
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know how that affects principles or what you do there, but that's just a word of caution or warning about this whole process. It has to be based in reality, real time.
So we've got to find a form of words, and it's like I was saying with the RMA, that's going to override this, whatever the reforms come up with, and whatever approach that we have to take. We might not be able to always use these principles. We're very aware of that. So where we can, we might want to do this. Yeah, okay. We're happy to move on to these four at the bottom, these brown ones. Environmental balance, prosperity, harmony, water is the source of life. Now, when I was looking at this list, looking at these four, I thought they don't quite fit with the rest of the list. Maybe environmental balance is something we want to achieve. Prosperity for, well, prosperous environments, prosperous economy, prosperous communities is something we want to achieve, surely. Harmony, that sounds very idealistic, but yeah, we want to live in harmony with our environment, for example, and water is the source of life is a fundamental truth. So they didn't quite fit to my mind, as principles as such. So I wondered whether they were sort of foundation principles. I do call them bedrock originally, but that set an image in somebody else's mind, and we can't get rid of that now. So I won't plague you with that one. But are these sort of cornerstone principles, foundation principles, or do we try and put them into the vision? What do we do with them, please? Any thoughts?
I think environmental balance it's a goal, isn't it? It's what we're wanting to achieve. I don't think it's an action. I think it's something an outcome that we want to achieve, as is prosperity. For my part, harmony is part of environmental balance. I don't see the need to have harmony there. And I think the water as a source of life is a standalone issue and statement on its own. So that's just a fact, isn't it? So that's how I see them. From my part, I'd remove harmony because I think that's spoken to in environmental balance. Okay. And you're right, they aren't actions, they're more goals. That's what we want to achieve by undertaking all these other actions or signposts in the principles. Lou, have you still got your hand up from last time?
No, I've just put my hand up again. I was just wondering whether these are more aspirational. I was saying something like give effect. Okay, to give effect to environmental balance. I agree with your harmony, and to water, or we could rewrite that a little. I know water is a source of life, to the preservation of waterway or preservation of water or something along that line, but give effect and recognise.
Okay.
How's that sound? The importance of.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think that's more the issue that we're dealing with here, isn't it?
Yeah. I was just wondering if we support the vision statement with some other points, as Councillor St Pierre was suggesting, then that might be where we can fit these in. We'll have to work through that and see what we can come up with. But yeah, I think I can take that away and work with it, if that's the feeling of everybody.
Seems to be.
Okay. Right. So I will move on, and you will. In our last workshop, I gave you a slightly different version of this, which you liked, which was a vertical structure with the 4 themes of natural, living, build, and manage. So you've seen it like that.
Could you put it in presentation mode so we can read the writing?
Sorry, I will tell you what, I'll duck out of this and try and bring it up on another document.
Actually, in our it's actually on Diligent, so page 211 on our workshop bundle.
Okay. But is that better on the screen? I can enlarge.
Yeah, that is better on the screen.
I can enlarge it slightly. No, I can't. It won't let me enlarge it now. Okay. As you can see, we've done a bit more work on this, and there's still work to be done, but I want to know whether we're still going in the right direction. This is only a visual representation of the strategic framework. The actual words that appear in the document might be slightly different. For example, we've been working through each of the 4 themes, and we're finding that what works for natural, living, and build, which are more externally focused, isn't necessarily going to work exactly the same for manage WIPO, which is internally focused. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. The sub-themes that you see there in the blue box are likely to change. We're thinking in terms of partnerships, business and community resilience, sustainable operations, planning and policy. So 4 rather than the 3 you've got there. So you see how this is still evolving, and there's more work to be done yet. So the idea is that we have some high-level goals in each theme. We come down to the bullet-pointed sub-themes in each box. We work out objectives, targets, key performance indicators, and that's the strategic framework. And then we move on to the implementation plan. Those 4 foundation principles at the bottom, we're now going to take those away. And you've got various other council documents feeding in at the top as well. So are we okay with the strategic framework as it's looking? Hopefully you can read it sufficiently now.
Yeah, there doesn't appear
so.
to be any opposition. Oh, Roger.
No, I think so. I think that, and recognising that some of those bullet points may change a little bit, but I think you've captured a good form there. Yeah, I'm quite happy with it.
You know, one of the things that we're wanting to do is make it clearer what these bullet points mean. Like, for example, in Living Waipā, we've got connections. Okay, what do we mean by connections? Well, that can be the infrastructure connections, water, transportation, it can be communications, and it can be all those kind of connections within the community and between communities as well. So I think we need to be clearer as to what we mean. But this is only a graphic. As we come to the document itself, we've got room to be a little bit more expansive whilst still keeping it readable. So we okay with the way that is looking?
There doesn't appear to be any opposition, no.
Great. I will stop sharing that and go back to the PowerPoint. Apologies for jumping to which one was it? That one. So I've got that. This has come up on 2 windows. Right. Okay, so the high-level goals for each of those 4 themes. And we thought, how do we justify selecting those high-level goals? We thought, well, if we use an approach that's been used elsewhere, then we're probably on good ground. My idea was to start with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and then refine them because they're aimed at state level. And we need to refine those down until they become local, taking out the ones that aren't relevant. And I say localizing them, then seeing if they're still relevant, which is the point that we've reached. There's still more work to do, but I need to know from you whether we're going in the right direction here. I'm reluctant to do any more work because there's quite a bit to do. Only for you to then say, oh, actually, we'd rather you hadn't done that. So I want to know whether I'm on the right lines. I sent you the examples in the supporting material as to where we got to so far on natural living and build. We've tried doing it on manage and that didn't work quite so well. So I say a lot more work to do yet. There's probably far too many on those lists for that level of the framework, and some of them may end up appearing under those bullet points on the strategic framework in some other form that's very local to ourselves and hopefully measurable as well.
I guess my comments initially, Jim, you go first.
No, I was quite happy to wait for you. I was just going to say, in terms of that localised and measurable, we should have prioritise in there as well. Okay. Somewhere along the line, whether it's instead of localise or as well as localise, because I think sometimes we get caught, and if you take the peat lakes, for example, we're going to protect all of the peat lakes. Well, we've got 16 of them, and they probably range from nearly pristine to practically swamps. So we need to have some point where we can prioritise which ones we're going to deal with rather than have an overall focus on a big picture, I suppose.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Yeah, strange enough, I was going to say we need to be wary that we can't be all things to all people, was what my comment was going to be, so much the same as you, Jim. And obviously, in terms of those sustainable development goals, you know, we need to check that they have relevance and applicability to our district and our people. So just wary of not making this more complex than what it needs to be, I guess.
Yeah, and making it too big. It's this really has the potential, like a lot of other projects of this nature, of really taking on the dimensions of Ben-Hur. Much as I wouldn't mind being the star of Ben-Hur or the director of Ben-Hur, then it's probably too big to cope with. So but yeah, if you're happy with what we're trying to do, then I'll carry on trying to refine it, localize it, make it measurable, and prioritize.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, so timelines. Now we've had a timeline change. On Thursday last week, the executive team endorsed an amendment to the project management plan, which is what you're seeing on the screen. And there's several reasons for that. We've got a high level of partner, stakeholder, and community interest, as you've probably gathered. We want to engage with that as much as we can, and obviously consider the feedback we get. And that work is still going on. I met with some high school students last week, which was fantastic. They were really into this. I'm meeting with business and agribusiness people on Thursday, and they're really wanting to engage as well, which is fantastic. COVID is restricting opportunities for engagement. We can't meet face-to-face at the moment. It's also likely to affect the priorities of people wanting to engage with us as well. That's without the effect it might have on the team putting this together, which of course we don't know what's going to happen there. We know staff resources are stretched, and this is a major project, and we really can't foresee being able to do both the strategic framework and the implementation plan in the next 10 weeks, which is really what we're trying to do. Moving the implementation plan to a bit later actually has better alignment with other projects, such as the LTP when we're developing business cases, the community spatial plan, economic wellbeing strategy as well. And we've also got meeting limitations and workshop opportunities because we've got meeting free July. Doing it this way also helps us to have the strategic framework complete before the election. So you've got something that you started and signed off on prior to the election. And also, if we can start the implementation plan while we're out for consultation on the draft, then you've got the comfort of knowing that this time the implementation plan is underway. Of course, in 2010, that didn't happen. So we are moving forward as fast as we can on this, but we're probably going to have to just split it into those two work streams. Which means then that in terms of next steps, we'll keep coming back and worrying you with workshops while we've got the opportunity. So probably looking again at goals and objectives and feeding back to you next month. And May, hopefully we've got something written and we can start going through that. Aiming to get the draft strategy as far as we can to you in June, to consult in June, July, submissions August. I suspect there'll be a lot of those probably, and get the strategic framework adopted by the time this triennium concludes on the 27th of September. Quite a bit to do. And with your directions today, that's really helpful in moving that forward. Any further questions at this stage?
Anybody, any questions? No, doesn't look like it.
You are, of course, all, as you know, welcome to email me if you've got any queries or thoughts. That goes without saying. So
Thank you, Graham.
we'll try and help where we can.
Excellent. No, I think we've given you a bit of a steer on some of those.
Oh,
those
absolutely.
issues.
Yeah, that's great.
Get back to us with a vision, and we'll see how it progresses.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Graham.
Thank you.